can resume. Before I open up questions 3.8 to 3.10, it occurred to us in the break that there is a question that we need to ask of the council, given what we've heard today, in terms of the approach of the plan to economic development, whether that's jobs or floor space. We've heard, and I put this very simply, from some input that there's not enough, and from the other side that perhaps there's too much. And what I'd like to understand from the council is what happens if we agree with either of those positions, one or other.
I think we need to take that away, sir. I don't think I want to commit to an answer at this stage without reflecting on it. Obviously, we wouldn't invite you in any circumstances to reach those views, but I think we want to reflect on that. And perhaps we can come back on that. Okay.
When would be the appropriate time to come back to that question? Tomorrow morning, or?
Perhaps, sir, we can certainly reflect on it overnight, and then we can tell you what our position is tomorrow, whether we need more time to reflect on it, but we can certainly deliberate on it overnight.
Okay. My only concern is that some people who might have an interest in the answer might not be here tomorrow. Mr. Corsier, are you here tomorrow? Okay. Ms. Cook, are you here tomorrow? In which case, that's fine. We'll deal with it first thing in the morning. Good. Let's move on to...
For anyone that isn't here tomorrow, the session's being recorded and published anyway, so you will be able to see the answer there. I think it would be useful to deal with it tomorrow morning, though, because of the implications, either way, on our topic for tomorrow.
That's partly why I'm saying we'll come back to you tomorrow, sir.
That's fair. Good. We'll move on to 3.8, 3.9 and 3.10 then. Mr. Linus, you want to start us off on that, or your colleagues?
Will I move to summarise the position on 3.8, 3.10?
Thank you. We believe the EC1 allocations in combination with policy EC2 provide for flexibility in the employment uses to be provided over the plan period. We really believe, as we set out before, that we need this plan to unlock particularly those larger strategic sites to deal with some of the issues that we've heard discussed today. Some general points on some of the supply comments would be that, again, we would see the existing floor space under EC2 as very much part of our overall strategy, so not limited to the site allocations that we have seen. That part or all of some of these sites have been built out or gained permission, as cited in some places. I'm sure we'll come to the detail of that. There's still capacity overall, and significant capacity, particularly on the larger of those sites. But I would suggest that we're talking about the jobs growth in the same plan period, and so that development is meeting that jobs growth there. I think I'll pause there, unless you want me to expand further on any particular points.
No, I'm content with that for the moment. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about these questions? Mr. Chapman, isn't it? Go on, you go first.
If I could, my main comments are in relation to office space, the supply of office space, and I know the council have said that they've built in flexibility into the available supply. But looking at the list of sites in policy EC1, I think that the main sites that are identified as being suitable for B1A office development are York Central with 100,000 square metres, land at Northminster Business Park, but it says quite clearly it may also be suitable for an element of B1A. That's a business park which is an established industrial location and has recently had permission for logistics development, I believe. And then there's two much smaller sites, Poppleton Garden Centre and Annamine Nurseries, both of which, according to our analysis, aren't available for B1A development. One of them is going to continue to be used as a garden centre, and the Annamine Nursery site has been bought by another developer and doesn't plan to bring forward office development. So both of those are taken out of the equation as far as I'm aware. York Central, there's planning outline permission for between 70,000 and 87,700 square metres of office use, but that's lower than the 100,000 square metres that's identified in policy EC1. And then Northminster Business Park, like I said, it's unclear how much B1A development, what share of that might be B1A development, but the fact that it's an existing industrial site suggests that it's probably going to be quite small. So in that context, and in our hearing statement, we've attached our own assessment of how much office space we believe is deliverable, likely to be deliverable, that's been carried out by Avison Young. And we've reached the conclusion that just over 80,000 square metres of office space is available. And if you compare that to in the council's hearing statement, table 1, which is the updated table from the update to plan table 4.1, that identifies a need for 137,000 square metres by 2033 and just under 150,000 by 2038. So it seems to me there is a big disconnect between what they're saying is the requirement for office space and how much land is likely to be available for office space. So that's my main comment and issue.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'll ask Ms. Dillon-Mood. So the introductory comment is to reiterate that there is flexibility within the allocations themselves to move between office use and others. Ms. Dillon-Mood?
Yes, in connection with the York Central allocation, the permission is actually only for part of the allocation. So there's remaining land on that allocation to deal with that. So I wouldn't describe it as a shortfall in supply in that particular case. I would also add that we've been very specific, as was just said, about not being overly prescriptive about the composition of employment uses. We've not defined on a very, very large site where there is existing office use what level of office use should be provided. Again, trying to provide flexibility there in the allocations in response to the broad likely demand identified in table 4.1. Some of the more detailed comments around the availability of the much smaller sites. Again, I would point to that we are looking at this policy and the supply response in the context of EC2 as well, and we've already heard today about some examples of windfall, if you like, other sites coming forward, other employment sites coming forward outside of the site allocations as well, which again contribute to that supply.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Yes, just a few points. We brought them up in our submission, but on the smaller sites, our client is more interested in the non-strategic sites, the small to medium-sized sites, which provide opportunities for SMEs and startups, which we've heard have been from the chamber a key element of the York economy, or would be, subject to there being space. And a quick review of the E-numbered sites show that certainly some of them are no longer available or seem unlikely to be available. One appears to be built out, E10. It was anticipated to be available for nearly 800 square metres, but from what we can see from the application, what was delivered was more like 400 square metres, so quite half of what it was anticipated for. And I appreciate we're talking very small numbers in the scale of the policy E1. The smaller sites combined offer 31,000 square metres, which is equivalent to one of the smaller strategic sites. But nonetheless, as I say, they're important for the smaller business SME sector. Other sites, as Mr. Chapman mentioned, there's a couple that appear to be unavailable. One being the garden centre, the other being a formant at the Anamine nurseries, which doesn't appear to be actively marketed and has formed part of the neighbouring industrial or manufacturing site, Portakabin.
Apologies, I couldn't hear you then.
Sorry, was that better? Yeah. So yes, the garden centre and Anamine nurseries, and another appears to have been planted with trees and turned into some sort of amenity space, which suggests it's less likely to come forward. That was E8 at Weldrake. Just a point on the availability and the accuracy of the anticipated floor spaces.
Go on.
Sir, I asked Ms Dillon to cover those. I mean, I think two introductory points. One, as has been recognised, individually the size of these sites is not significant, and so far as some of the points raised in the written statement rely upon...
Sorry, I don't know if it's because time or the days
Yes, sorry.
getting long and that's affecting my hearing, but I just didn't hear you then, Mr.
That's
Lyons.
okay, sorry, it's my fault. I'm not speaking as a pop star should, sir. It's right to recognise placing these points in their proper context. The size of these sites isn't any near the size of the strategic allocations that have been identified, particularly in the policy. Second point is that insofar as the written statement makes reference to availability issues because of the absence of any sort of clear marketing, we don't accept that that's evidence of a lack of availability of a site just because it isn't being actively marketed. As far as the specific sites are concerned, I just asked Ms Dillon to cover those insofar as she needs to. Or Mr.
Yeah, I mean,
actually.
I don't want to focus on this too
No,
much
I
today.
appreciate that, sir.
I understand why people are making the point because it does affect the supply.
Yes.
So if we can keep the comments at
We'll keep it very
that
brief.
kind of level, that having been said, when we come on to site sessions, that will include these sites in more detail.
Yes.
We will obviously be wanting to know about the deliverability
Yes,
and the
sir.
availability of those sites. Do we have anywhere something that gives us a kind of updated position? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of York Central. I mean, we were talking about that in the Phase 1 hearings, but that was a little while back,
Yes.
and I'm not clear what the current position is on that site, for example.
Yes, sir, we're more than happy to provide a note on that. I'm thinking that might be more helpful to you in the form of a consolidated note dealing with sites generally that are allocated rather than putting it forward in terms of individual hearing statements, for example, on the individual sites. Is that a correct assumption? Would you find a sort of general update on deliverability more helpful?
Yes, and again, as a marker, I suppose, in relation to housing sites, we will be wanting to know that you have willing landowners, just as I want to know that in relation to the employment sites as well.
Understood, sir.
So if we can note that as a homework action, yes.
Done, sir.
Can I just make one point for context? It might be helpful just to give a sense of the overall space that there is available already in York, so you can see how that fits in. A best estimate I've seen is that there's 8.6 million square feet of office space in York, and a little less than that of industrial. So 8.6 million square feet, 860,000 square metres puts in context what you're talking about in terms of 400.
Sorry, how many? I just don't work in the old money.
Square feet, 8.6 million square feet of office space. So the kind of developments we're talking about in terms of kind of 4,000 or 8,000 square feet on a particular site. You need to see that in the context of the overall quantum of space.
Yeah, no, sorry, it was your unit of measurement that I was struggling with. I don't understand square feet.
Oh, a square foot is essentially a tenth of a square metre, but yeah.
Yeah, 10.764 springs to mind, but divide by 10 roughly. Yeah, I think that's right. So somewhere around 850,000 square metres. Yeah.
So in the light of the exchange on the individual sites, I don't think we need to cover the points on the individual sites, so that's acceptable.
Mr. Keogh then.
Yes, so just one point, which again has just occurred to me as we've been talking today in relation to question 3.10. I don't think, again, something we probably didn't pick up on fully in our response to the questions, but and I stand to be corrected on this, but again, I think the policy EC1 allocations are for the plan period and for the 5 years beyond the plan period. So although the policy says provision for range of employment sites during the plan period will be made in the following strategic sites, I'm not aware of any allocations beyond the plan period up to 2038. So I'm assuming that this includes the requirement for employment land beyond the plan period to 2038. Unless I'm corrected on that.
My understanding, that's correct.
In which case, Mr. Corsier, I'll come to you.
Thank you, sir. A very brief point. Question 3.9. Is the proposed distribution consistent with the evidence base? And the Council's response to 3.9.1 is the location of employment floor space provision reflects the spatial shapers. And again, we're going to be going matter 4, sir, but set out in policy SS1. So that just isn't correct. Spatial shapers are set out so on pages 27 through to 30. Two of the allocations, two of the largest allocations, are within areas shown on figure 3.1. ST27 and ST37.
I'm sorry, you lost me there, Mr. Corsier. I didn't understand the point.
So the point is, the Council say in 3.9.1 that the location, i.e. where the sites are, strategic sites are, reflect the spatial shapers. This is 3.9.1
of their statement.
Last bullet point. And obviously, the spatial shapers we discussed at long length in the Phase 1 hearing, sir.
I recall that well.
And I think you made some findings about those, sir. The point I'm making is a very simple point, is that two of the largest employment allocations fall within areas shown under figure 3.1, and they were ST27 and ST37, fall within areas which are shown as being important to the historic character and setting of York. And I won't repeat what paragraph 3.5 says about that. I've said that several times already. I have much sympathy for what my colleagues on to my left, and indeed what the university has said about difficulties with employment in York, and there is. But sir, you have to look at the big picture here. The big picture is if there are problems, sir, you have the explicit recognition in the plan that actually it's the heritage and character of York which drives its economic success. And there are limits to how far employment development can go without actually intruding beyond those limits, and therefore affecting the long-term economic performance of York. And so what we have, unfortunately, is a position where a high employment requirement is driving a high housing requirement, and that, in our consideration, actually is affecting the setting of York. And so the big picture, sir, is that this, well, we say it is, but you may well wish to reflect upon whether this is a position where MPPF paragraph 14, I'm using obviously the 2012 version, tells you that this may not be, this is a situation where needs may not be met in full. So that is a big issue in front of you, and obviously we'll deal with that under housing requirement tomorrow, where the issue is even more pressing. But it is something, sir, that you really, York is so important because of its setting, and this has been grappled by numerous inspectors over the past 20 or 30 years. As a very young consultant, I remember sitting in a structure plan alteration for North Yorkshire, where the structure plan panel endorsed the principle there should be a new settlement beyond the green belt to meet York's needs. So I took you to the York Green Belt Local Plan Inspector's report, where he was firmly of the opinion there were limits beyond which development should not go. And this plan does take it beyond those limits, which he thought were appropriate. He made clear that they were long-term limits. He basically said York has a character that if you go beyond, these are, I think he referred to a Stone Age settlement in the Orkneys as a type of monument which you just don't affect. And he said that that was the nature of York's character.
I take the general point. I don't want to stray onto matters of green belt for fairness reasons.
Absolutely, sir. But I just really want to make clear that I do have sympathy with what has been said, but it is an issue which you need to grapple with. This isn't just a strict numbers case, as it may be if you were dealing with the Kirk-Lees local plan, or indeed the Leeds local plan, where the purpose of the green belt is very different. Thank you, sir.
So I don't think I need to respond in detail, given that Mr. Cursier's points are largely related to the relationship with housing need, green belts, and spatial strategy, all of which is going to be considered in other sessions. I think fundamentally, though, he's striking the classic planning balance in a different place to where the council's doing it. And for the reasons that we have given in the evidence base, and we are going to explain through subsequent hearings, we have provided a proper basis for the way we've struck the balance and the judgments that we have reached. We appreciate entirely Mr. Cursier reaches a different view, but our position remains that the striking...
Do you want to just pause for a moment, Mr.
Yes.
Linus?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Our position remains that the way that balance has been struck in the circumstances of this plan is appropriate and sound. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman?
Thank you. Can I just make one last point in relation to question 3.9, which is the amount of employment floor space provision and its proposed distribution consistent with the evidence base? And I just come back to what I said earlier, which is that the evidence base in this case is the two employment land reviews, and what they've done is a modelling exercise that says very little about the appropriate distribution of space. Like I said earlier, it doesn't appear, certainly from when I read the employment land reviews, that there has been consultation with commercial agents, with analysis of commercial property market data, those types of things that can give you an indication of market requirements and occupier requirements. I can't see that in the evidence base, so it's difficult to say whether the employment floor space provision, the distribution of that is consistent with market requirements. But what I would say is, in the office market, an awful lot of the supply is concentrated at York Central. And York Central is going to be very high quality high-density city centre office space, which I'm sure will meet a large amount of occupier requirements, but it won't meet all requirements. There is always businesses that want access to the strategic road network, quick access to roads, don't necessarily want to be in cities and prefer business park accommodation. And the current allocations that are outside the York city centre that might be suitable for office, I don't want to get into a sites discussion again, but they don't look suitable for a high-quality office development.
Is there anything in that, Mr. Linus, you need to
I can just
respond
deal with
to?
one general point. I mean, I think as we've explained already, the documentation in front of the inquiry explains how the council has sought to respond to consultation. Section 4 of the 2016 Employment Land Review is one example of where it's identified that consultation has taken place and the ultimate employment land requirement has been reflected, reflects the consultation that has occurred. So we don't accept that there isn't any means by which the council has demonstrated a willingness to listen and understand what is happening in the marketplace. We've achieved that not least through the consultation that's taken place. Ms. Dillon, will you have anything else to say? No, that was it. Thank you very much, sir.
I mean, I'm happy to be corrected on that. If that, I write employment land reviews and I read lots of employment land reviews, and they always have a section on commercial property market trends where they analyse these points in detail. Where is the demand? What are the types of occupier requirements? What are agents saying? I just couldn't see that in the evidence base. If it's there and I've missed it, happy to be corrected. I just couldn't see it. And if those conversations have taken place, but they're not published in the evidence base, or at least the key findings of that, it's just very difficult, to answer these questions, and for the council to make these decisions in a transparent way if they're not publishing the findings of those consultations with agents, with businesses, and so on.
I don't think I need to add to that. Sorry, referred to section 4 of the report, section 3 as well. I'd invite you to consider, but I don't need to add anything further.
Sorry, Mr. Lyons, I couldn't hear that.
Yes, I referred to section 4 of the 2016 ELR. Section 3 as well touches upon work that took place and responses to consultation. I just invite you to read sections 3 and 4 of the 2016 ELR.
Mr. Keogh, your nameplate is up. Is there anything else anyone wants to add on these questions, these last 3 or 4 questions? Last 3 questions. Does that suggest we call it a day? 9:30 start tomorrow. I think our view is that there's a lot to cover, but it would be useful to try and get through it.
That's our hope and possibly expectation, sir. Yes, thank you.
Well, that's what we'll be working towards, but
Yes.
I'll deal with that when we open in the morning. Well, thanks everyone. See some of you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, sir.
Until then, thank you.
Thank you.